Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on freight transport, from new methodologies to innovative solutions. And congratulations for making it at 9 o'clock so early in the morning. My name is Paola Chiarini. I work for the European Commission, DG Mobility and Transport, where I deal, among other things, with logistics research. I will moderate these sessions together with Fernando Liesa, Secretary General of the ALICE Logistics Platform, and we will share the moderation part. In this session, we will have 3 presentations of projects, Storm, Senator, ePIcenter, and this will be followed by a question-answer part, so I hope you will have quite interesting questions. And before passing to the presentation of the project, I would like just to make a couple of points on the policy context in which this EU research is developed and carried out. The first point is, you might know that the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, which is basically a document of the Commission that sets the vision for the future of mobility and transport, supports more sustainable, smart, efficient, and resilient logistics supply chain. So this is the objective. And the strategy wants at the same time to strike a balance between decarbonizing all transport modes and revamping and make certain that we have a multimodal logistics system. To do this, encourage also behavioral and organizational change. And the idea is that to improve the efficiency of the logistics sector, we need new measures, new innovative measures. So the Commission is currently working on the greening freight package. So this is a set of legislative measures, including, for instance, a revision of the weight and dimension directive, counter emissions EU, so a number of legislative proposals that is planned to be adopted in June this year. And the objective is really to help increasing the efficiency of the logistics sector. On the innovation side, since we are on a research and research conference, it's true that, especially for the road transport, there is a priority in boosting the development and the uptake and deployment of low and zero emission vehicles. But at the same time, we really want to see these embedded in a very systemic change, in a very strategic systemic change. And to do this, we really need to pass from methodologies, research, to innovative solutions that are implementable and they are of interest to end users for taking them up. So this is just, as you will see, the project are very much in line with the priorities of the Commission. So I start immediately, I pass the floor immediately to the first speaker, Dr. Janko Todorov. And Janko is a senior scientist and certified project manager at the VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. He works in the field of smart vehicle fleets modeling, simulation and optimization, as well as data applications in mobility services. Janko, for the STORM project, you have 15 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Paola, and happy to be here and present what kept us busy in the STORM project over the last 3 years. So basically, STORM stands for Smart Freight Transport and Logistics Research Methodologies. In this project, we were focusing mostly on kind of like identifying new trends and technologies for freight and logistics. We put also some thoughts regarding digitalization to identify new types of data sources and then utilize them to design new methodologies through new digital tools that we have designed in this project. Sorry. This one.
You have to press on it.
Okay.
And now you can use this.
Yes. So basically, the project is currently in its final year. It has been funded in 2021 within one call that was about advanced research methods and tools to support transport mobility researchers, planners, and policymakers. In comparison to many other projects that have been presented here, this project is a relatively small one. We are just 5 partners VTT Technical Research Center in Finland is leading this project, and we have partners from Fraunhofer in Germany, Chalmers University of Technology, Czech Technical University in Prague, and Ertico ITS. And basically, I said we set our goals to identify and screen new data sources, develop new methodologies, kind of like generate new type of use cases, including latest technologies. This was our main focus. Then, throughout the time, we had lots of partners. Many of those are widely known. We have very good collaboration with all of them, and throughout the project, we get lots of feedback regarding the work that we have done in this project, and we're very, very thankful for this cooperation. A little bit about the objectives in the project. So basically, in the very, very start of the project, we've been focusing in interacting with different groups of stakeholders in the freight and logistics area. And the main goal for us was just to identify what are the current trends, what companies they want to, how the companies they see the future, and also from the policy side, different stakeholders, organizations, how they see where the policies are weak and how we need to support the better the freight and logistics sector to implement new technologies. And in that side, we have conducted a large stakeholder work and interviews. I would tell a bit more about in the results. Then another big objective was to screen the freight and logistics area for new types of data. What is currently, beyond that is currently known, and try to figure out how we can utilize those data in the future to assess the implications of different new technologies, and also to utilize the data into digital tools to let's say to showcase through illustrative use cases actually what could be expected in different situations. For example, in freight and logistics, what I'll tell a bit more in my presentation. Then another objective for us was to, since we were screening a broad range of options of data, how to create actually synthesized data that could be utilized for various applications, and for example, in assessing future technologies through use cases. And then another objective for us was how to create new type of frameworks, and mostly we were focusing on utilizing AI approaches in designing our use cases. And then the last two objectives, basically, we were focusing on kind of the use cases that we provide in the project to provide recommendations for different stakeholders in this area. Then moving fastly to the results. So basically, one of the very first results, I said we've been screening new trends in freight and logistics, and you can see from the cloud presented here, actually, which are the trends that the freight and logistics stakeholders see. And quite some times during the discussions, we were kind of like touching the topics related to digitalization, and since the project was running during the COVID time, actually, we were discussing a lot what is the implications from the pandemics in the supply chain and logistics networks. Then we also focused on identifying what the future analysis need, what is beyond the current knowledge, and what needs to be further kind of like discussed in this area. And we summarized our findings through the stakeholder working within these three topics, including environmental, digitalization, and policy. I won't go through all the stated points, but basically, as you can see, there's still lots of pending questions that we need to find answers for all of them. And at Storm, we just focus on identifying those. Then another big piece of work is identifying new sources of data for freight and logistics. So quite often today we talk about digitalization, but it's a general term, and we talk about a lot of data and AI, but when it comes to practical application, we found out that there is not a good overview, for example, what kind of applications exist yet in this area. And that's why in our review, we focused on identifying actually what are the most common applications, and then you can see the summary on the table on the right. And then we tried to also figure out beyond these current applications that are identified actually, what else it's missing in the picture, and how the data can be harnessed, for example, for new applications. And in general, what has been found out that data are everywhere. data utilized by companies, but then still lots of challenges from organizational perspective, technical, and legal that needs to be solved. Especially when it comes to the mindset of the companies from the freight and logistics area towards utilizing digital tools, towards exploring new digital business models. Then from technical perspective, how to actually store, utilize the data, how actually to deal with the practicalities of sensitivity, data ownership and privacy and so on. And then from the legal perspective, we all know what GDPR says, but then when we speak with the companies, what we hear is that it's not always very straightforward how to implement GDPR in this area. And this is one of the challenges. Then another piece of work that has been recently developed in the project, it's called Proposals for Integrated Strategic Assessment. So basically there are a few wide-known models for strategic assessment in freight and logistics. In this study, we focus to identify what is missing in the current models, because basically we speak nowadays of including into the supply chains lots of different new technologies, and those models yet are not able to address the new technologies. And in this study, basically we were focusing on identifying the bottlenecks in the models and focus on the topics and wrap up the topics actually what needs to be included in these strategic assessment models. Then moving a bit more on the use cases that I mentioned. So in Storm project we have three main use cases. The first one is regarding how to design EU-level heavy truck charging network. In this study, basically, we've been utilizing open source data and stepping on previous study made by the colleagues from Fraunhofer together with ASEA. And basically, through this use case, what we wanted to show is like through the data how we can actually, and digital tools that we utilized, mainly AI, how we actually can support the thinking and the policies in EU. How actually the planning of the charging network should happen. And as you can see in the bottom, basically in this study, we taken as a basis what is the current freight and logistics demand in EU with diesel trucks. And we put some thoughts, including the directives of the latest directives about the driver's resting time, and including some thoughts if we switch fully the freight and logistics to be electrified one, what would be the needs in Europe in terms of charging infrastructure. And then as you can see in the bottom, we created a chart showing in which countries the density of the charging network should be higher than others in order to keep the same demands. So as you can see on the very right is Germany. We identified needs to invest a lot in charging infra, and then on the bottom is Albania. But then basically this shows like if you want to keep the current demands and flows of goods, actually what kind of investments needs to be done in Europe in supporting the charging network. And then of course we focused on two types of kind of like charges, estimating kind of like chargers with charging power up to 100 kilowatts and megawatt chargers. And then you can see some preliminary results from this study. By the way, we are organizing a workshop late March. We'll be opening a bit more on this study. If someone is interested, I can give you after the presentation more information when it will be organized. Then the next use case that we've been developing in this project is related to innovative inner city logistics with zero-emission vehicles. Quite often we speak in urban areas that we need new type of logistics vehicles, but then in many situations the deployment of zero-emission vehicles depends strongly on the environment. And that's why in this use case, we bring in two perspectives. We bring in study from one district in Helsinki, Finland, which is sparsely populated, and one district in Prague, which is heavily populated. And then what we want to show through the use case that how environment influence the thinking in deployment of zero-emission vehicles. For example, some preliminary results, what we have seen that in some cases might not make sense even to put zero-emission vehicles like as vehicles, but then might make more sense to include some unconventional vehicles, like, for example, drones, and so on. And we try to support through this study the thinking of the city logistic companies, because quite often when it comes to greening these services, they start quite often in the wrong way, just purchasing vehicles and not really thinking how this transition should happen actually in the most cost-efficient way. And then how to take into account the practicalities from the environment, from the operations, and so on. And then what we strive to do, actually, because we have a 3D model in the city of Prague, then later on in the spring, we would also create a 3D simulation showing actually how the vehicles are moving around the city to illustrate. I guess we can produce a video and show it in the project website. And then the third use case, which is in very early development, we're developing a policies assessment tool. This policies assessment tool is stepping on top of the Matisse model, that it's activity-based, agent-based modeling simulation tool, which has been developed by the colleagues in Fraunhofer over the last years. Basically, what we want to do in this use case is to include, to update the tool itself, including the implications of plenty of new technologies, and then simulate the policy use case. And we believe that through this tool, we can assess bottlenecks in policies and then support the Commission and different stakeholders thinking actually what is missing in the policies and how actually they need to be amended to better support the inclusion of new technologies in the freight and logistics scenarios. And then by the end, a couple of slides about the future recommendations. So basically, through these large stakeholder interviews that we conducted in the beginning of the project, we mapped lots of priority areas for research and innovation. And last year, over the TRA conference, we had the pleasure to discuss together with Alice and Paola Chiarini. We organized a small session and also bringing some insights from another EU-funded project, BoostLog. Which are the areas, for example, that where the EU needs to focus and channel more resources in the forthcoming years, for example, to better support the freight and logistics area. And then basically through the review that we made around different data sources and actually all the data sets that we prepared, which are freely circulating in the project website, we believe that we can support different new zero emission scenarios. But then from the whole thinking, basically what we find out is like there is still lots of organizational, technical, and legal challenges that still needs to be solved in employing data. And then the current strategic assessment models, they need to be amended to better support the thinking from supply chain perspective, not only from vehicles perspective in the freight and logistics. And then through this policy tool and through the use cases, basically, we believe that we will create impact by supporting at EU level, the thinking how the charging networks in different countries, they need to be developed. What are the actual needs and how much electricity is actually needed in EU to keep the same demand flowing as it goes nowadays with diesel vehicles. And then to bring value for the logistics companies, mostly in the thinking how efficiently they need to deploy zero-emission vehicles and even to think about maybe in some cases for unconventional vehicles. And of course to support the policy thinking of different stakeholders and mainly EU through the tool that we have developed. But this is in brief in me. I'll be available after the presentation if you have additional questions after this session. I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Janko. Quite interesting. Oh, sorry, thank you. Quite some interesting suggestions also for policy. Let's pass to the second speaker, Michael Hatfield, please. Michael is a director at MDS Transmodal Ltd, a specialist transport economics consultancy based in the UK. And Michael has more than 27 years of experience with the logistics and freight transport sector, and he specializes in logistics, including urban logistics, road and freight and rail freight operations and transport economics. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to speak about Senator here today. Senator, so the official title is that we are a smart network operator enabling a shared, integrated and more sustainable urban logistics. Bit of a mouthful, but to just put it into sort of plain, simple language, we are essentially developing a digital tool to try and optimize freight collections and deliveries in the urban environment. The aim is to better encourage, encourage and facilitate greater collaboration between operators, such as the ability to share and combine loads when undertaking deliveries or collections. The key output from this is hopefully to reduce freight vehicle trips entering and within European cities. Just a brief bit about who's on the project. We've got 11 partners in 5 countries. We have a €4 million budget funded through the Horizon 2020 programme. We commenced in autumn 2020, and it's a 48-month project, so we're just over halfway through. So at the moment, we haven't actually got any concrete results to show you. So if you're expecting some pretty graphs and tables, then you're going to be disappointed. But I can certainly update you on what we're actually doing, certainly with the living labs in the 2 cities. It's a proof of concept project, so we're not actually developing a finished product, but we are looking at the end product should be commercially exploitable. So hopefully someone will take it on and develop it into a sort of revenue-earning product. So we are developing a business plan as part of the project. A brief overview of the partners. Obviously, MDS are based in Chester in England. We're sort of providing a sort of business consultancy service to the project and including the development of the end sort of business model. Perhaps the 2 key players are Anpost, the Irish postal and parcel operator, and Correos in Spain, because they're both heavily involved in the living labs, which I'll come on to in a minute. The tech is being provided essentially by Software AG in Germany, and Deosto and Dodgist in Spain. So, urban logistics, I think we're all sort of fairly aware of what the issues are. Large vehicles, noise, traffic congestion, damage to the urban infrastructure, particularly in historic cities, road safety, interaction with pedestrians and cyclists, so perhaps we don't need to dwell too much on those. Perhaps on the right-hand side of the table, I think is perhaps a bit key in the post-COVID world, where we're all sort of sat at home, teleworking, and sort of buying products from Amazon rather than going into city centres. So clearly, I think certainly in the UK, but I think in most European countries, there's probably a need for city centres to very much reinvent themselves. They're going to need to provide a new retail offer to compete with the e-commerce sector. Increasingly, city centres are a destination for leisure, whether it's arts venues, museums, food and drink, etc., etc. And increasingly, it's a location where people want to live in a car-free environment. Certainly in the UK, we're seeing a lot of empty retail stock being repurposed for residential, particularly sort of for young sort of people who perhaps haven't learned to drive and don't want to learn to drive for various reasons. So the challenge then is very much you want to try and create a sustainable urban logistics supply chain. That will no doubt in the future involve battery electric vans. It's going to involve cargo bikes, portering, etc., etc. Increasingly, we want car-free areas in city centres. It's a sort of very pleasant. Certainly, the last time I came to Brussels, a lot of it was very much based on the car. I've seen, obviously, last night some areas which are now pedestrianised compared to the last time I came, much more pleasant environment. We clearly want to reduce emissions of pollutants and greenhouse gases. However, we still want to maintain an efficient supply chain when delivering into urban environments. And that's sort of, if you're going to a restaurant, you clearly want the restaurant to be fully stocked. If you're living in an urban area, you clearly want parcel deliveries. So what Senator is sort of designed, or what we're looking at, is very much how we can better optimise load planning and operations when delivering or collecting cargo in the urban environments. We're looking at how we can encourage and facilitate better collaboration. That could involve sharing capacity, combining loads, one operator perhaps passing some consignments on to another operator so that they don't need to actually undertake the delivery. The tool does have a multimodal approach to it, so it's not just vans, it's not just heavy goods vehicles, it will include cargo bikes, possibly parcels on trains or trams, portering, etc. So in that respect, it's sort of addressing a number of EU policy objectives and priority areas. So the diagram on the left is just a sort of brief overview of how it potentially would work. The system would in some circumstances, allow direct deliveries to continue as they do now. In other cases, it may force deliveries to go via, say, a consolidation hub, where loads can be combined into a fewer trips. Or it could include, loads being forced into a micro hub, where then it will be passed on to a bicycle or a sort of on-foot type delivery operation. So the actual tool itself will include urban infrastructure and planning in it. It will include the fleet of the various operators that participate in the tool. It will include transport networks and also transport networks, not just the actual physical road, but it will include sort of real-time operations on the network. So it will hopefully will identify congestion. If a vehicle if there is congestion, it should hopefully be able to move consignments in real time to other operators to avoid congestion. And it also will include sort of rates, modal economics in there as well. I'm not a techie person. I am not really sort of fully understand how the system is being designed and worked. If you're interested in that, then come and see me after. I can swap cards and put you in touch with someone who will know a lot more about it than I do. Perhaps the final thing to mention on this is it will require data sharing between ships and operators, and that's clearly an issue in terms of, will one operator pass on sort of rates and costs or volumes to other operators in what is increasingly a competitive market. Just a quick overview of some of the commercial and logistical and regulatory barriers that are at play. Firstly, the logistics sector would probably argue that it's already operating reasonably efficiently. They do tend to maximise vehicle fill on a regular basis. And they're all already using digital technology to better load plan and route vehicles. It's also a very competitive marketplace, and certainly I think one of the reasons why e-commerce has very much taken off is we do now have a competitive parcel sector in the EU, which has driven down rates and driven up sort of service quality. So clearly we want to sort of maintain that commercial environment, and there are clearly a lot of EU directives in place which ensure that there is competition and restricts sort of monopolistic or sort of practices. So clearly we want to promote collaboration, but we still need to sort of adhere to what the law says in terms of competition. Another barrier is the different IT systems which the different companies run. I'll come on to obviously one of the living labs in a minute in Dublin, but one of the issues I found there is that Ampost's IT system won't talk to DPD's IT system, and it won't talk to Amazon's IT system. So trying to sort of scan and track and trace cargo between different operators is proving a bit difficult. And clearly I've obviously mentioned the data sharing issue as well. So in terms of actually sort of developing the products, we've got two living labs. One is based in Dublin and one is based in Zaragoza. So I'll just briefly give you a quick overview. The Dublin Living Lab is looking at developing an urban consolidation centre where parcel deliveries would be delivered into that initially consolidated and then delivered into the centre of Dublin, which is currently a traffic restricted area. So the idea is that different operators would initially hands their product over into the consolidation centre, and then Ampost would then complete the delivery into the city centre using its sustainable fleet of delivery vehicles, and they include battery electric vans and e-cargo bikes. The idea is that it'll be operated through the Senator tool, and while Ampost will actually operate it, it would be branded as Senator. A stakeholder workshop was held last May. These were the participants, and overall the participants have agreed, barring various technical and other sort of regulatory barriers, to take part in the trial. And these are just some of the issues that were sort of raised during that during the workshop. Traffic congestion, illegal parking were obviously clearly very much top of the tree in terms of the issues. Barriers, IT was obviously mentioned that. Costs as well. But overall, there was a sort of an agreement that we would hopefully take the Living Lab forward. So at the moment, it's been taken forward on a sort of virtual basis. There are some issues, particularly to do with the IT, which are preventing it going forward into an actual physical trial. So it's being run currently as a virtual trial, but in future, it's hoped that we can turn it into a physical trial at some point. So moving on to Zaragoza, there's a number of initiatives there taking place. The first one is between the Zaragoza markets and Correos. The markets in Zaragoza are very popular, but during COVID were forced to close, and at the time they did move to an online sort of ordering type system. So they're very much looking at trying to progress that into the future. The markets are back open, as we can see from the photographs that we took last June when we did the field trip to Zaragoza. But they're very much looking at how they can, Correos can better undertake an online sort of delivery system from the markets. They're also looking at how the suppliers to the markets can better collaborate and reduce vehicle traffic. So if you turn up at the markets at sort of 8 o'clock, there's a bit of a sort of queue of vehicles as each supplier sort of tries to deliver its own sort of consignment into each different store. So could we look at how we can collaborate better on that to reduce traffic? The other initiative in Zaragoza is how Correos and its sort of commercial arm, Correos Express, can better organise their deliveries across the city. Correos is the sort of national, sort of, if you like, regulated postal service operator. Correos Express is more of a sort of standalone commercial arm. Traditionally, they've been operated as separate businesses, but they're looking at how they can better collaborate in future. So just finally, just round up, obviously we are looking very much at how we can exploit the tool. So hopefully we can, once we get the two living labs approved that the concept works, we clearly want to try and turn the product into something that we can eventually sort of hand on to a commercial operator, whether that's say a DPD or a DHL, or whether it's even someone like an Amazon who can sort of take it on and turn it into a sort of real life commercial product. So at the moment, we MDS are looking at how we can do that. And I think the two things that we'll need to sort of look at with the tool is, can it actually reduce costs in terms of operators, running costs, and can we actually improve the quality of service to the end user? And if these two can be achieved, then clearly the tool will be able to generate some value, which we can then exploit as part of the commercial strategy. And we're looking at a case study at the moment in Chester, in England, where MDS Transmodal are based, as to how we can see if we can achieve some value. And the top picture there is at 9 o'clock in the morning. That's deliveries taking place. There is a vehicle ban after 10:30 in the morning in Chester, so you can't actually take vehicles into the city centre. So before 10:30, it is a bit like the Wild West at times, with all sorts of deliveries turning up. After 10:30, the barriers come down, it's pedestrianised, and the bottom photograph shows how then the street environment is turned from basically a delivery yard into a sort of streets, a sort of pavement cafe type environment. So we're very much looking in Chester at how we can use perhaps a cargo bike operation. This is actually not a Senator project in itself. It's actually a project that we're doing for the City Council separately, but we're using the outputs from it to try and inform the Senator business plan. So we're very much looking at how we can, after 10:30, once the vehicles are banned, how we can then perhaps continue deliveries using a cargo bike operation. So just to summarise then, we've just passed the halfway point in the project. We're continuing to plan and implement the living labs and hopefully demonstrate the proof of concept. We clearly have some further work to do on the digital side, so clearly the platform needs to be completed, the dashboard, the data sharing issues need to be overcome, as do the IT systems compatibility. And obviously we're still progressing the sort of whether we can actually commercially exploit the outputs at the end of the day. So with that, I think we'll be happy at some point to come back in future once we've actually finished the project. Either myself or someone else from the consortium would be happy to come back and report back once we've actually finished. So thank you very much, and I'll obviously be happy to take questions at the end of the session.
Thank you very much, Michael. It would be very interesting to see what will be the results of the living labs, and especially in Dublin, what are the issues with the operators. That would be very interesting. So let's pass to the third speaker, Karen van Brussel, for the ePIcenter project. Karen is the project coordinator of the ePIcenter project, and she works for the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. She is an experienced project manager with a passion for digitalization and a demonstrated history of working in the logistics and supply chain industry. Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction and for having us here to promote the ePIcenter project. So ePIcenter project is a project that focuses on a lot of new solutions and technologies that will make our supply chain more robust, greener, and more efficient. As you know, the value chains today became a lot more longer, more complex, more vulnerable. A lot of disruptions happened, mainly the last years. They happened very frequently after each other. If we think of factories being closed, ports being closed due to COVID, we had a vessel blocking the Suez Canal that created a huge bottleneck in the total chain. So within this project, we are looking for solutions that will help that supply chain to become more agile, to react to these disruptions in a correct way, and new technologies that will help with the environment and the wildlife shipping in those areas. The project has 36 partners. As you can see them all here. A big portion of them are industry partners, which is great because there we know that the solutions we are looking into are actually used by the industry and are developed for them, that they use them now, but they will continue to use them when the project ends. Most of the partners are in Europe, but we have a couple in Canada, in Latin America, and in China as well. So the project started in June 2020 and will most likely, or not, we're asking for an extension, end in November of this year, and it's funded by the Horizon 2020. So we don't have any actual results, the same as the previous speaker. Okay, so since the scope of the project is very wide, we kind of clustered our use cases into 3 demonstrators. We have the EpiNode demonstrator looking at the new technologies. We have EpiLink, who's looking more at the trade lanes between different ports. And then the Arctic is really focusing on the environment-friendly and wildlife-friendly shipping. But I'll go into detail in each one of them in the coming slides. Okay, so the EpiLink case is really on the trades, as the word says, the linkage between 2 ports or 2 areas. Where we're looking at the vessels and the train transport being used mainly, and as I heard from the other speakers as well, data sharing and digitalization there is key. All the partners in that supply chain will share the data amongst each other to make transparency or visibility of where the cargo is, and to be able to create then or to take the corrective actions when something happens through that supply chain, so that the whole flow can be optimized. Synchromodality is also an important factor that we look into. So we have in the solution a synchromodal algorithm being created. So the synchromodality is a concept, a transportation concept, where the various transport modes are being used in a synchronized, controlled way to optimize the flow. And when you have actual data, that flow or that the tool set will kind of give you different options or different ways to transport and to avoid the disruptions that are on your chain, to make sure that your goods arrive in the time or at a cost, or the CO2 emission that you kind of, the preference you have at that moment. The EPI-link cases, well, we have 4 of them, and here you see the partners that we are working with. So the transatlantic and the Euro-China rail is more between 2 continents. Transatlantic is between the Port of Antwerp and Montreal, and the China rail is between China and Duisport in Germany. And there it's mainly the data sharing between the different parties, the collaboration between them, how that can help with visualizing, for example, emergency product to make sure that it's being delivered in a faster way, or by sharing information on when the train is arriving, how long the train is, and so on, so that the terminals can prepare themselves to accept the train and make the changes, so that there is a better flow of the transport than there is today. For the middle ones, the chemical and the beer, there we're mainly focusing on the last mile. When vessels arrive, when they receive information on what time the vessel will arrive, the expected time of arrival, and then in the end the actual time of arrival, when they receive that a lot earlier than what they do today, they can make the right decisions on how to get those goods delivered at their end destination. If it is by barge or by truck, they can reduce their inventory based on that. So there we're investigating not only the tools we have, but also what the impact will be for these customers when they have that visibility. The next demonstrator is the EPI-node. So there we look into new technologies. The ones we're looking into is the Hyperloop, which you can see on top, the modular containers, and the autonomous vehicles. So what we have in transport today is kind of a conflict situation. Customers would like to have their goods in a very fast way. But they also want it in a very green way, ecological way, which is kind of conflicting when you want a fast transport. Most of the time it's a very noisy transport, or it's air polluting. So that's why we're looking at new technologies who kind of, covering that, which is the Hyperloop. The Hyperloop, there the goods are transported into a tube. Low pressure tube. The specialists are sitting here in the room, so if you have questions more on the specifics of it, they'll be happy to answer that. But the cargo is in a very high speed being delivered in the tube. And in the use case we are looking into is it's the Volkswagen plant in Wolfsburg today receives a lot of trucks with delivery parts, to get their production going, and it's creating a huge bottleneck and a huge congestion in that area, a living area, because it's very close to the city. So what we are investigating is, what if we put a logistics service center outside of the plant, and we link that center with a Hyperloop to the facility? What will the impact be on that congestion on the trucks? It will be 24/7 operational. So the parts will then be delivered by the Hyperloop instead of by the truck. So those are the partners that are working on it. And then, as I mentioned, the gentlemen up there have more details on it. The second innovation that we look into are the autonomous trucks. So it's our partner Einride and Astazero who is offering the test tracks to test it. So those autonomous trucks, well, they have no driver, of course, and they're 100% electric and controlled from outside, so they're really autonomous. Here, what we are looking into is, well, there are different levels of where to use these trucks, but what the project is really focusing on are the first two ones. So the usage of them within a fenced area or in a nearby, in a close-by area. We had the first tests finished in December, where they did some testing within a fenced area, like the truck going through a gate, parking on a loading deck, getting it loaded, unloaded, and a bicycle passing by, a pedestrian coming by to see how it reacts in that situation. A film of it is made that you can see on the. It was just finished too late to get it here for the conference, but you can watch it on our website. It's over there. Yeah, this is actually to show how transportation can move from the diesel trucks that we have today towards autonomous trucks. So it's not in a phased approach, but it's really going over each other. What they're trying to say here is that you first have to go digital to get all the data of what is happening within your transport flow, and with electric trucks, that more data is being gathered by having that. And when you have that information, you can really see on what lanes there is, for example, the usage to go to autonomous trucks. So, for example, if you have a lane where there is a lot of traffic, waiting time, or a very standard flow going back and forth, like we have in the port quite a lot, it is interesting to go to these autonomous trucks. So that is being looked into in the project as well. And then the last innovation one is the modular container, or the connectainer as we call it. So what is it? It's actually, sounds quite simple, but it's like two 20-foot containers that you connect together and create a 40-foot container. Why would we do that, you might ask, is because there is a huge imbalance of containers around the world, and a lot of empty containers. Air is being transported, not only on vessels, but also on terminals. A big portion of containers you see on all the terminals are empty, on the trucks on the road. And this is because of the imbalance. We, for example, ship out of Europe a lot of heavy material you ship in a 20-foot container because the weight is more important than the volume. And from Asia, for example, when you receive goods back, those are more voluminous goods. So you put those in a 40-foot container because you want more space to transport them. So there is already an imbalance created between containers you ship over there are the 20-foots, but they need 40-foots to bring it back. So therefore, shipping lines are shipping empties around the world to make sure that these imbalances are being covered. And yeah, as I mentioned, a lot of air is being transported. And with having the modular containers, we're investigating how much that can reduce it. Those containers actually exist. They received a certificate last year, so they are proved to be seaworthy. They can resist all weather conditions on board of a vessel and can be handled at the terminal as well. They also found a solution on the container numbering, because every container has a unique number that can be tracked and traced in the whole process. But they also found a solution on that one. What we're doing today, still in the project, is to analyze the effect of using it, the effect for the terminal, the effect for the port, the effect for the shipping line. And those, again, are the partners that are involved in that one. The last demonstrator is the Arctic. And here, well, we all know with the climate change, the ice is getting thinner. And the commercial, or the interest is growing to have commercial shipping through the Arctic region. The transit time is a lot shorter than going all the way down through the Suez Canal if you go up north. So what we're doing in the project is to make sure that if it would ever happen, it will happen in a very ecological, wildlife-friendly way. So we're looking at technologies that is helping with the navigation through ice conditions. So this is our partner Aker, who developed a kind of type of GPS tool to, instead of going from A to B in a direct line as you would normally go, they kind of have now a tool developed to follow the thickness of the ice. There the transit time might be longer, but the fuel consumption is a lot less, and also the speed is a lot faster. They will not only look at the thickness of the ice, but they will also look into the endangered species or all the wildlife that exists in that area. In this case, it's the whales that they look into and how they migrate and where they breed, to make sure that that tool also collects that information whenever they are giving a navigation route, that those areas are being avoided when shipping through the Arctic. Another partner in this project is creating an algorithm to reduce or to change the speed of the vessels in these areas automatically, that the propeller is being adjusted where needed to make sure that the speed is as ecological as possible. And then to finalize, we checked the goals and the KPIs we put forward. We checked them with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. The ones you can see in green are the ones that we clearly feel that we also are having an effect on them or supporting them. As you can see more in detail here. So the solutions we're looking into have an impact on the industry, on the climate, and also on the people that are working on it, on the environment that they work in. So thank you. If you have more details, you can come to me, or these are websites and LinkedIn pages where a lot of more detailed information can be found. So.
Thank you very much, Karen. Definitely a lot of activities. I leave the floor now to Fernando for the question and answer session. Thank you, Fernando.
Okay, before going the question and answer, but please start thinking about your questions for the projects. I'm asked to do a summary of the technical advances and reflection on the topics that are being addressed by the projects. And first of all, I would like to thank the speakers for their way they communicated their projects. It's not easy to communicate 4 million euro or 5 million euro projects in 15 minutes, but I think you managed to give quite a lot of the insights, at least keywords of areas in which the projects you are working. For me, the first reflection is that even if we are in a road conference, you can see the broad aspects that need to be addressed from freight transport and logistics. So then when we look from logistics into the problems, we need to we look for them in from many different perspectives. So then we look how to solve actually the things, and then you get creativity, and for example, Hyperloop may be a solution for particular use cases and others that will be mentioned. Then for me, I think it's what it's clear is that the projects, all of them address the European priorities, so then it's making sense, particularly on decarbonization and reduction of emissions and the digitalization and the possibilities digitalization brings to create efficiency in logistics. Those are the two mains. And then actually, as Janscho said, how to manage the transition in freight transport and logistics to zero-emission logistics, and there I think the work that has been done, or it's been done on dimensioning the problem of charging in infrastructure in Europe, I think that's very interesting contribution from from Storm, I'm looking forward to it. I think you are also working on other use cases like the one for data and how you can really build from those new data sources, value and applications. And this is all the industry is very busy with that. And the Commission is also, it was not mentioned, but everything dealing with the Data Act, the data governance, and data spaces. Concretely, the mobility data space are quite interlinked with this. And then the other point is, actually, it was really interesting on this innovative city logistics with zero-emission vehicles and this model, printed model for augmented reality visualization. Maybe later I'll have time, I'll ask you about that. And then the policies assessment tool. Clearly here it's, we say in Alice that how we can look into the future only looking into the mirror of in the car. If we look into the mirror, we only see what happened in the past. And then we try to build a future based on what we see in the mirror, instead of looking ahead on all the opportunities of technology. And there is where this policies assessment tool, I hope, can really give us a little bit of hint of not looking into the next step, but looking with the possibilities we have, how it would look like. Then on Senator, I think it's quite interesting, all the topics you were addressed, even the topics were proposed from Alice and work with the Commission even before the pandemics. But we didn't know for sure, but it happened that it was really making this how different alternatives to deliver in city can be merged in platforms, how operators can make better use of the resources to do that, and actually to address this question on promote collaboration to be more efficient while retaining competition. So then that's actually addressing quite an important problem. And actually we see also the concept of physical internet, synchromodality, that it's applied in different, I think the three of you mentioned physical internet, synchromodality, so then there is where technology can really, and all these concepts of collaboration can really create a good framework. Then the other point I like from Senator is this deliveries 24/7, because at the end cities are usually telling you need to deliver this time in this area, and then to source of those stores, it's clear, you create a mess. Because if everything needs to happen in the same moment, same time, you create a mess. And then looking into other alternatives in which you can plan, organize things in a better place. I'm really curious to know about that, and also on the urban consolidation centers. I think it's also quite interesting, and we see more and more private initiatives that are really starting to work, and I think it's a lot of the developments made in the past are really now being materialized, and really looking forward to see which are the learnings from Senator. And last but not least is ePIcenter, that P is for physical internet, of course, and really it's a complex, it was a very complex call, I would say. So then normally the projects out of complex calls are complex as well. So then, but at the end, I think they managed to get to the three areas and trying to bid on different technologies and alternatives and go deeper, like Hyperloop, the modular units, like the autonomous transportation. This was quite a long time ago, this call. So then we see a lot of new projects focusing on those topics already. So your project was a pioneer. That is another project, by the way, but it's all that, and also this topic on the Arctic region, that for a moment it was really how this could be one of the new global roads and the way you are addressing. So here I am. I tried to do a summary of it, but at the end you can see the projects were not focused on a single problem, but and at the end also I want to say we have here 3 projects, but there are at least 20 or 30 projects working in different other areas for road transportation, freight transportation, and logistics. As Alice, we had the opportunity to host 16 of them in our booth in TRA, including Storm and ePIcenter, and many others didn't join. So then that's to say that really we are managing a quite complex environment with many different possibilities and alternatives. So let's then move to the Q&A. So then I cannot imagine you not having a question for a particular topic in the presentation. I assume it will be challenging for Janso, Michael, and Karen to answer if you go too deeper in the question. But do you have questions so far? Could see there one.
Hi, John von Stamm from FIR at the RWTH, Aachen University. I have one question to Janko. You talked a lot about data standards and also the difficulties for collaboration and data sharing. So my question would be, do you have any recommendations for data standards regarding the different data sources for logistics? Because we have the situation, for example, in Germany, we have, if you look at the freight forwarders, it's like more than 80% of freight forwarders only have less than 10 employees. And they have a plethora of TMS systems and so on with all different data standards. So do you have any precise recommendations which data formats you would use? Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately in Storm we weren't focusing on data standards rather than just identifying what kind of data are actually available around us. And then what kind of applications they are already available, or what kind of applications we need to build in the future. And because for us in the beginning, it was very, very hard to see actually what is available. Because there are lots of data here and there, but actually what kind of applications we build upon the available data, it was very hard to see. And that's why we performed this review from mostly from research papers and available information, and we try to systematize like what actually it's kind of like hottest application at the moment. But then thinking about new applications and new technologies, we try to put some thoughts actually what kind of new data sources will be needed in the future, and what kind of data we need to collect actually to create new type of applications that will better support the deployment of new technologies.
Okay, thank you.
In the back. Meantime, I would like to say that in the past there were a few projects addressing this topic called Olix and Celis. This is now in the European Freight Transport Information Regulation and the DTLF. They are trying to do, or they are organizing data standards for every business to administration that should be compulsory for member states to have this in place by 2025. And that's only a portion. From the industry, I don't think it's anymore a discussion on research, but actually we see from Alice, for example, the Open Logistics Foundation, run and started by Fraunhofer, is really bringing together logistics operators that work with the smaller companies to create open and universal software applications so then they can engage. So then this is really starting to be for processes like eCMR, so then it's starting to be really taken and really considering that. It's not from the public side, but from the private side, we see this is moving in the right direction. But I think the microphone reached the point. Okay.
Yes, this is Alejandro Lanuza from the TEDx. My question is for the ePIcenter project, especially for the autonomous truck part. Always that we hear about autonomous vehicles, we hear about autonomous and connected vehicles, and I wonder if you could give us some insight about the connectivity aspect, especially because you've mentioned that this solution would be focused or addressed to fenced areas nearby rural and highway, and especially in rural and highway there is areas in which connectivity might be challenging, like for instance tunnels or areas with mountains, etc. And my question is regarding connectivity. If you could give us some insights of the requirement, especially on the infrastructure side, if there would be any requirement for the infrastructure to provide that connectivity.
Well, within the project, we look at the fenced area, so within a company, and to have the transport there, and in the nearby area, so which can be in a port from one terminal to the other. We're not go within the project, and I don't know, maybe within Einride they go further, but within the project they're not looking at mountain areas and so on, so that I cannot help you with that. But with connection, do you mean how it is being followed up, how it's being controlled, the controlling area?
Well, I'm not an expert on the field,
Okay.
so I don't know how it works actually.
Well,
so I don't know if
okay.
it needs constant communication or it only downloads the data and then it runs by itself.
Well,
So-
the data is being used. First of all, the data is being used to determine where it's interesting to have that autonomous vehicle being operating. So there they look at data from the electric trucks, for example, that they have first on that area, and then they will see if it makes sense to do to put an autonomous vehicle on that lane. When that vehicle is put there, they have a control center. It's a bit like in a cockpit that people are sitting in a control center and they're monitoring the truck while it's operating, so that they can still react when something is happening or is not going as planned. So they have like drivers who can drive 4 or 5 autonomous. They're not driving it, but they're following 4 or 5 trucks at a simultaneous time, so that they can react in situations that is needed. So that's the idea they have. And then again, the truck is gathering information that they will analyze again to improve it and to make changes in the routing or in the processes they are doing based on the data that it's gathering. So, but again, if you like more details, I can give you the details, or go to the website, or give you the details of Einride, who's actually looking into it, and they go further than what we just do within. What we do within the project. They're looking a bit furthermore in detail in a wider scope than that we are having in the project. Yeah.
Perfect. I see another question there. A couple more.
This one's going to be very short because it's linked to the previous one. And maybe the answer is already given, so that's why it's going to be super short. You were posting that situation of one person being kind of leading 5 vehicles, like traveling in platoon and having and gathering all that communication, I guess, for all the platooning elements. What wireless communications are foreseen for gathering such data of the platooning vehicles? So not only the leader, but the ones that come in behind. Thank you.
Fernando tells me it's not a platoon, so no, I'm not aware of the details. But it's not. The vehicle is going by itself. It's not a train of you. It's a vehicle going by itself and doing all the operation, freight within a terminal area, for example. So it's going back and forth and like that, and then it's being managed by a control center that is on the premises. That is not on the premises of that terminal. That is on an off-site location. If that's what you. But the tools or the communication tools that they use, I'm not aware of that. That's not.
I saw another question.
My question is probably follow up the first question the gentleman asked about data standard. As Carrie mentioned, the journey, the go digital is probably the first phase that we're going through. And Michael talked about some of the challenges they're facing, like data sharing, different IT systems that they have, as well as trust, which are important also. Janko mentioned about GDPR, data privacy, data security. In real life, when you want to use any data modeling or collaborative data platform or data sharing, what we found is the main blocker before even looking at the data privacy or GDPR is data quality as well as data availability. And that's why in academia we like to make assumption that data is there, data has good quality, but when you want to implement in real life, you realize that data is not there. Even if it's there, most of the data is, we call it, rubbish. And we end up with the model that we get garbage in, garbage out. As part of your project, did you look at these sort of challenges and how can you find a solution in terms of data quality and data availability? I know that the AI policy could be an answer to some of these challenges, but not necessarily going to solve this problem. Thank you.
Yeah, basically I fully agree with you what you stated, but in Storm we haven't been digging deeper, and it wasn't in the scope of the project.
Unfortunately, I don't think this is the scope of any of these three projects. But I'm happy to discuss with you. I fully agree with you, but there are different governance models that are trying to address that and are working in practice now. So, yeah, your question was not a question, was a statement that for me it's clear that it's like that. So then, but I don't think if the others have addressed this data model.
Well, I'll just say on the Center project, it was more about actually compatibility between different systems. So when, for instance, DPD handed a parcel over to Anpost tried to scan it, and it just wouldn't recognise it. And then when DPD then scanned it, it said it was delivered, but actually it hadn't been delivered to the end user. It had simply been handed on to Anpost. So it was getting the two different systems to sort of talk to each other, so that the consumer at home can actually, when they log on and see, you know, where's my parcel, they can actually still track and trace it.
That it's not on data sharing is really creating the way you can collaborate to somebody in a plug-and-play way. That is the concept of the physical internet, actually. So then it's like if here we talk French and German, and then we cannot do the session because we don't know. We find English is the good, and then we can communicate. But it's not about building trust. It's organizations that work together. They don't have a good way to work together because this may collaborate Anpost and DPD, but then comes UPS with the new system. And then it's really creating this, what we talk on the Open Logistics Foundation. So quite a lot of work in progress, I would say.
Well, within the ePIcenter project, we did look at the data sharing as well. We have a partner there who has a data sharing solution where data, and it's indeed true, if you put rubbish in, rubbish comes out. But what we noticed in the project is if all the partners have the same vision and the idea to improve the flow, they are willing to share their data because all of them see the benefits coming out of it. So I'm not saying it in a global way, but on certain trade lanes or certain flows, you can achieve it, yes.
Yeah. So certainly the three had something to say. Okay, perfect.
Hi, I work for Trips, a French manufacturer of cargo bikes, actually. So a question for Michael. Congrats on the project first. So you mentioned that it was important to remain as efficient as when you began, because it's the point of it, even being greener. So during your project, did you find cargo bags to be as efficient as e-vans? And also, did the company you did the pilots with, for instance, in Dublin, wanted to keep on working with cargo bags in the end?
Well, the actual live trial in Dublin's only sort of commenced, so I can't really sort of comment on that. What I can say is what we're looking at in Chester, which is feeding into the business plan for Senator, is in some cases cargo bikes will actually be more efficient, because at the moment you've got a situation where after 10:30 in the morning you can't deliver into the city centre. So it means that, for instance, DPD or Royal Mail or whatever have got to sort of put a van out on the road in rush hour, and that gets then caught up in traffic, and actually they potentially have to put more vans out than they would otherwise do if the traffic was free-flowing. So the use of a cargo bike actually ends up being more efficient because you can actually have, I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but potentially you can actually have a smaller fleet of vans, which then hands over to the bike, which then can deliver at will after 10:30 in the morning. So I think it's a bit sort of horses for courses, as they say sometimes. Sometimes the bike will end up being more efficient because it will actually reduce vehicle mileage by the battery van. However, if you're still delivering a full van load to one location, then clearly going direct in a van is clearly going to still be more efficient.
Another question here.
Okay, another question from Michael. You stressed the importance of collaboration while maintaining competition. And a very crucial part is the operating model, I would say. And you mentioned Amazon or DHL. The situation right now is that there are a lot of forwarders and service providers who, of course, don't really want to be dependable upon those giants, let's say. So, yeah, what would be your approach? What would be your strategy to get the buy-in of also smaller providers? Is it something like a gig economy approach, or what do you have in mind? Thank you.
Yes, certainly the way I think the Senator tool is being designed is that smaller operators could sort of effectively offer their fleet into the system, so that when the system is then looking to allocate loads to operators, that fleet will show as available, and potentially you would get a bigger player such as Amazon handing over the parcels to the smaller operator to undertake the final delivery. And it may be, say, in one of the things we're looking at in the Chester study we're doing separately from Senator, but the results are feeding into the Senator business plan, is that the cargo bike operation into the centre would be effectively contracted out by the City Council, so they would run a competition on a periodic basis, say every 5 years. People would bid for that contract to operate it. You know, and that could be a cooperative, it could be a smaller, a sort of, you know, employee-owned sort of type operator that could bid and win that contract, and then effectively would be taking parcels off Amazon or the likes of DPD and completing the final delivery.
Okay, more questions? At least a couple. You choose, Marcela. Yeah.
Yes, Roderick Alfaerli, Norman Science Park. It's just a question for the STORM project. You were talking about the heavy trucks charging network. I was just curious how that result, how is it in line or with the AFIR regulation? Have you considered that in your project?
Yeah, basically, to generate this result, we were developing our own concept. The data we got from the ETIS Plus database, which in fact kind of like captures the demand around Europe, and then we implemented, for example, the new directive. How do you include the driver resting time and all the regulations into the picture? And then we put also emphasis, kind of like the thinking, what are the main nodes in Europe where the freight is happening? And then through the concept we developed, then basically we try to infer actually what will be the density, the needed density of the charging stations in different countries, and in which countries the investments needs to be concentrated in order to keep the same freight flow as it goes with the moment with the diesel vehicles.
Very good question. I think after STORM you could tell European Commission or even Parliament if the AFIR objectives are really matching the actual needs or to what extent. And I think that would be very interesting. And I also see AFIR and the deployment will be in the TEN-T network. And we could see a lot of other networks or other routes there that are not in the TEN-T, and I wonder what will happen in those ones in the next 5 to 10 years. But it's a very good question and good reflection, I would say, from my side. Thank you. Ian.
Thank you. Ian Fife from Bosch. I have a question, and I might be making the wrong assumptions now. It's a challenging question to Senator. I want to challenge one of your targets, and the target is reducing cost. I'm assuming we're talking about door-to-door delivery, so right to the person's house, a package, for example. And the question is, are we encouraging the wrong behavior from people? In other words, if we extrapolate the reduction of cost down to zero, then people will be ordering even more things, producing even more CO2 along the way. Do we need to have something that's more balanced? Is the first question, more or less. Or, and Fernando knows some of the way I think about these things, we need a new delivery concept. So you see these DHL delivery packing stations showing up around places, but they're usually someplace where I don't really like to go. They're sort of out in the area. Now, if they're located a little more, so closer to where people live, so to speak, without being too intrusive, would that be a better concept? So basically asking somebody, how far are you willing to walk, for example, to save a little bit on your package where it would be much more efficient? So really encouraging new behavior and not this idea of always reducing cost. I think it's a little, and you said it yourself, people want things fast, but also sustainable. So there's a contradiction. So the question is, what compromise are people willing to make? So not always just chasing the cost target, but how can we encourage people to do things the right way to reduce CO2?
Well, if we could be here all afternoon, I think. That's a very good point, and we could be here quite a long time to discuss it. I think, generally, I think the message from Senator is it's about trying to perhaps reduce rather than eliminate vehicle trips. I think it's also it will hopefully encourage different attitudes as well, because there's no reason why the Senator tool couldn't instruct the final delivery to be to, say, a collection box at a station, so that you then pick it up on the way home from work. And also, we are trying to, part of the solution here is to try and make city centres a more pleasant place. So, if that works, then that should attract people back into city centres. And I think I mentioned in the presentation that, we're trying to sort of make city centres a more pleasant place, and that includes retail sort of effectively reinventing itself, and that probably means smaller, more niche sort of type shops offering perhaps a different service to what they've currently offered, and that potentially is attractive to small businesses. So it's not just about reducing costs. The other thing as well is we can get on to the topic of externalities, and in basic terms, that's the sort of wider cost which sort of transport puts on society, and it's not just perhaps the end user cost, but actually the benefits which wider society can sort of generate from actually reducing or using sort of zero emission modes.
Just a reminder, this is a very important concept, and there is a call opening in May on how retailers and consumers can collaborate to indeed look at changing towards a more sustainable behavior, towards more greener choices for deliveries and returns. So in May it opens the next call. Thank you.
And thank you, Ian, for this, because the call is not there coming from the air. It's coming from somebody. Additional questions? We are reaching to the moment, the coffee break moment, so then I don't see more questions. Thank you, Paola, for the preparation, moderation, and guiding us, and for the three speakers driving us into this very interesting projects, and all of you for coming here at 9 in the morning and being so active with the questions. That great engagement, and really looking forward to next edition where we'll see the results of this and other fantastic projects. So now enjoy the coffee break. And next session it's at 11. Okay.